What that tells us is that sex is a deeply intimate act. It takes time to learn each other. It takes time to grow together. It takes time to communicate. And it actually takes time to be vulnerable. The world's picture of sex is actually a very low view of sex. A physical act between two people, it becomes something that is self-serving, something that has no real meaning or lasting value. They both have a desire for a great sex life, but how they get to that are very different. Because they haven't talked about their expectations in a way that gets them on the same page, they start to view the other person as the source of the problem.
What if everything you've been taught about sexuality is only half the story? You've heard that sex is a gift, but in your life, you've experienced more sexual pain than celebration. My name is Matt Cline, and I'm your host. Welcome to the Exposed Life Show, where we explore God's true design for sexuality, bring darkness to light, and discover Jesus at the center of it all. Let's go. We're here with Braden Hafner, aka Half Bro, aka Big Arm Half, aka the Horsies MVP.
No one knows what any of that means, by the way.
Hey, if you listen to Pure Victory Podcast, which Braden is aka the host of the Pure Victory Podcast, and we were the co-hosts of Pure Victory together for 4 years, and the Horsies was our hockey team that we're on. So
That's right.
Braden is the star on the Horsies. But this is fun. This is awesome to get on here. We had to go our separate ways, which was sad in the podcasting world a couple of years ago, but you're still going on strong, which I love. And no, we got a lot of people reaching out still from Pure Victory. So it's awesome. Thanks for continuing that on, buddy.
Well, thanks for doing what you're doing. I think we doubled our impact. Let's just look at it that way, right?
I hope so. Yeah. God knows what he's doing. It's not division, it's multiplication, right?
That's right. It's multiplication. It's what we're all about.
Yeah. Well, thanks for coming on. This is fun. So I'm happy for some of our guys to get to know you if they are newer to the ministry and aren't familiar with Pure Victory Podcast. Now, if you guys are listening, I highly encourage you to go over there. There's got to be close to 300 episodes on Pure Victory now?
Yeah, I think you think I should know this, right? 270-ish, something like that.
Yeah.
Yeah,
That's
pretty
awesome.
crazy.
That's awesome. And you're also with Family Life Canada. Why don't you share a little bit about what Family Life is all about?
Yeah, that's my full-time gig. And we are an organization based here in Canada that aims to bring help and hope to marriage. So that is really a massive part of the ministry that my wife and I are involved in. That is the main thrust of what we do. And part of that is working with local churches to help them build marriage ministry, but we're also speakers at our weekend getaway conferences, which you should definitely check out if you're in Canada. We host them all throughout Canada as well in beautiful locations, but we also run Starting Marriage Strong, which is a pre-marriage prep course that we do all across the world. And then we also do other events with churches and even parenting stuff as well that Family Life runs as well too. So we got a lot of things that we do, wear a lot of hats, but we love it.
Yeah, and you do a good job. We've sent a lot of people to the getaways, and I know we obviously Restored and Family Life, we refer back and forth, but we've just heard so many good things from the getaways, and we personally have been impacted by the getaways. You bugger, had me come sit front row last year at the getaway.
Let's just pause you there for a sec. I didn't force you to do anything. You actually were going to sit in the front row and give me a stink eye to throw me off, if I remember correctly, is what you're going to try to do, but it didn't work.
No, it didn't work because within 5 minutes of you guys talking, I think it was Kristen or one of you said something, and I start crying, and God's ministering to my heart, and things are coming to the surface, and I'm like, I'm supposed to be giving him the stink eye here, and here I am getting impacted.
Hey, you held it together. I mean, the way you make it sound is like you're blubbering in the front there, but that's not what was happening. I mean, you're very stoic. I mean, you're emotional, but yeah, it was one single tear dropping to the floor.
One single tear. Oh, it's funny. All that to say, it is an impactful weekend, and the getaways are awesome. One of the things that I want to bring to the forefront here for couples and even for singles, I think is really important, because we have a lot of single people think like I used to think. It's like, man, when I get married, it's going to be awesome, right? And we have these comments that sometimes people throw out, and it comes from a good place, and probably that's a lot of the messaging that we hear. But then married people are not always the case. So you guys talk about seasons of sex, the seasons of sex that couples go through at the getaways in your guys' material. Can you share a little bit about what that looks like?
Sure. So in married life, I mean, we go through seasons, right? I mean, early on, you're in your honeymoon phase, and then later on, if you have kids, then you're in the season of raising a young family, and then you start to move more into your teen to close to 20-year mark of marriage, and that changes too. Your kids are getting older if you have them, and then you move into your empty nest phase after that. So we go through seasons there, but then there's also seasons that we encounter as individuals because we always say this at Family Life. You're probably married to 5 or 6 different people over the lifespan of your marriage. Now, I don't mean that you're married literally to 5 or 6 different people, but your spouse and yourself as well are different. You change. I mean, we're fluid as individuals, so we're changing. And so that impacts us in our marriage, not only that, but our sex lives as well. And so what we were when we were 24 is very different than what we are when we're 35 and then 45 and beyond. So we're always changing. And our marriage has different seasons when it comes to our intimacy. And I think one of the good news pieces about this too, we tell younger couples this all the time. Hey, I'll even ask you, Matt, what do you think the sweet spot for sex is? Couples report, the sweet spot. You know what that is? What
No, I
year?
mean, I could cheat because I've been with you
You
for
maybe
so
know
long, and
this. You're
you
looking on
you've told me
Instagram.
so long. But no, I know what you say is not what I expected, because I thought the sweet spot is the honeymoon phase, right? It's just
Mhm.
gonna be awesome in the honeymoon phase. But I remember I was engaged and somebody said the empty nester phase is like the best time for sex. I'm like, that's a long ways away.
Yeah.
I had never heard that before. But you go for it. What's the answer?
Yeah, well, you're not wrong. Years 20 to 25 is when couples report the highest satisfaction in regards to sex. So the sweet spot. And I think that's surprising to a lot of couples because usually we think the best seasons in life of sex for us in our married life will be when we're young, we're limber, we have our best bodies, and we have that passion and that zest for each other, that youthful zest. So we think it's going to be early on, but actually it is later. And what that tells us is that sex is a deeply intimate act. It takes time to learn each other. It takes time to grow together. It takes time to communicate. And it actually takes time to be vulnerable. And so I think that's actually really good news because this is an area, sex, that many couples struggle with. I think we all have some level and degree of struggle with this because it's so deeply vulnerable and so deeply revealing. Like to lie naked with your spouse isn't just a physical thing, there's a spiritual sense to that too. There's a vulnerability that's just so unique. And to create safety for each other in that as well, to serve each other in that, it takes time because the messaging around sex in our world these days is so selfish. Sex really is taught and shown in our world to be self serving. What can you get out of it? How can you feel good? How can you use those around you to get your needs met? So that's what's revealed sometimes in our marriages because that's what we've been taught. And then so it's like deprogramming all that bad wiring and learning God's design for sex and marriage. And it takes time. Learning that, hey, we're growing in this together. God designed it this way, one man, one woman to be married, to grow in this over time. I think that's good news because if like a lot of couples will get married and are like, this isn't working the way I thought it was supposed to be. So I think
Yeah.
I married the wrong person. And that's
Let's
not
not
true.
let's not be compatible, right?
That's right. Yeah. And isn't that another bad messaging? Learn how to be good at sex early on. And then also you got to be sexually compatible. So you got to have sex with your boyfriend or girlfriend to learn if they are marriage material, if we're sexually compatible, and how much damage that message has wreaked on people.
No.
Massive. It's
I
just, it's terrible.
Do you remember doing that episode? I don't know if it was 3, 4 years ago. It was on sexual compatibility, and in our research beforehand, there was an article that we looked at, and it said, like, sexual compatibility is super important for the longevity of a relationship. And then it said, like, the next paragraph was like, "This is what sexual compatibility is. You both want sex in the same way and the same frequency." It's like, oh, that's impossible. Like, nobody has sexual compatibility if that's the definition. However, this is really important for marriages. It's like, what a hopeless perspective the world gives.
Oh, it's so true. It's something I think that when we believe that, man, it sets a trajectory. Like you think, well, I don't have the same libido as my spouse, so what am I supposed to do with that? And then you just feel so down on your relationship. And then when you do the comparison game, because that's what things like that do, right? You compare yourself to this perfect couple that's out there that doesn't really exist. And you're like, well, that's not us. So now I just feel really bad about our sex lives. I feel really bad about our intimacy. And I mean, when you have that mindset, a negative mindset around the area of intimacy and sex, it's really hard to break free from that. It's really hard and challenging to realize that, you know what? It's okay that sometimes there's difficulty here, but together as a team, we're going to grow. And I don't think there's a growth mindset. It's more so I have to have from day one the perfect sex life based on articles like that or things like that. And if I don't, then I probably with the wrong person. And there's people out there that have actually bought into that lie and then they'll leave their relationship. And that's just so sad. Just so sad because God designed it that we grow together. God designed it that we learn each other and that we learn how to communicate. It's layer by layer. God designed it that way to strip those off in the sense of becoming more vulnerable with each other. And I think that that's a beautiful picture of sex. The world's picture of sex is actually a very low view of sex. It's sex is holy. Sex is an incredible gift from a good God. The world doesn't view it that way. It's just friction. And when you view sex just as friction, just as a physical act between two people, it becomes something that is depraved, becomes something that's self-serving, something that has no real meaning or lasting value. And then even then, if it's just a physical act and we don't get that physical act correct, sometimes the view on it though puts this unrealistic expectation upon your relationship in a way that's ill-fitting. It's just going to make you feel like your marriage is less than. And so I just think that God's design is the way that we need to be leaning into as a married couple and learning what that means for us. And of course, there's messaging that challenges that we have to come to terms with in our past and different things that we've experienced. That is God's plan for us is to experience an incredible sex life as husband and wife.
That's good news. That's good
Yeah.
news right there. I
There's
like
great
that.
news about sex and God and his design. I think that's what people need to they view God as this cosmic killjoy, like, yeah, sometimes people do in the sense that
Yeah.
he turns his face when we have sex, or there's some shame around it, like it's just something that he's only created for procreation. That's not true. Like, look at the Song of Songs. Look at the different verses throughout scripture about serving each other, about loving each other as husband and wife. It is a beautiful thing. And he designed it to be pleasurable. How amazing is that? He designed it to connect one of us to each other on a deeper sense. And he designed our brains to do that too. So it's incredible the way he's designed us.
It's incredible. It's incredible. The way that he designed sexuality, I think sex like points to intimacy, and sexual desire is like a catalyst for intimacy with the Lord, and also like spiritual intimacy, emotional intimacy to get to know your spouse. And you have your desires, and it's like, okay, let's talk about it. That could lead to emotional intimacy, glorifying the Lord. But the world, like, even though I don't really love when we refer to sex as intimacy, because
Right.
it's like, that's, you just said it's like a low view of sex
Hmm.
that the world has, which is a great way to put it. And like when we say that sex is intimacy, I think that's missing so much of what actually intimacy is.
You're right. You're right. And that's a great catch.
Yeah, like sex should lead to greater
Mhm.
intimacy, and our desire should lead to intimacy. Sex itself is not the pinnacle of intimacy.
No,
And that's
it's
what the
not.
world shares, right? Like if
Yeah.
the sweet spot is 20 to 25 years into marriage, like you said, we don't have our best bodies typically at that point.
Hmm.
But porn shows like, oh no, you need the best body, biggest body parts
Yeah.
in order to have the greatest sex. It's a total lie. It's crazy.
It is. And part of that messaging too, even when you think of the word sex, people will often think that just means intercourse. And then
Right.
they'll just think also it just means a certain thing that maybe they've seen in porn or on TV or what's expressed in music. It's just a view that is so low. Like sex is a serving act of love, a selfless act of love, of putting another's needs above your own. And sex isn't just intercourse. Intercourse is one part of, but I think God designed sex in such a beautiful way in the sense if you think about it, for a man and a woman typically the main way that she is reaches orgasm isn't through intercourse. Like some do, but typically it is through other stimulation. And also a big part of it too is God created a difference between men and women in the sense that as men, I mean, it doesn't take much for us to get stimulated, really. It
We're
does.
ready to go, baby.
Breeze. Yeah, that's right. We're ready to go. And for women, though, like as men, we have to put aside those desires in that way, in the sense of learning how to love our wives by creating warmth, by creating kindness, safety, being willing to touch, being willing to arouse. Like men, we don't learn arousal at all because we're aroused at a drop of a pin. But a woman doesn't work like that. Like it takes more effort on our part to do that and create warmth in our relationships. So God designed sex in the differences within sex so that we serve each other. Isn't that cool? That's so cool. And I think that's one of the things that we miss in marriage is like really it's about learning how to serve and love each other. It's
Mm,
not about demanding our needs get met. It's not about demanding anything. It's about serving. And I think that's a picture of sex that we need to be teaching. We need to be showing. And even what you said about intimacy, so many people, when they hear that word, you're right. They just think sex. Intimacy is so much more than that. Because if you think of marriage and the seasons of sex, for instance, there's going to be a season and time where sex might be painful. There might be a time when our bodies aren't working the right way. There might be a time when she's pregnant and that's just not happening, or she's going through a period, or even as men, like as we get older, some of us struggle with ED, right? Just as our body changes. So how do you love each other through that? How do you serve each other through that when it's not looking the way it does, say on the TV screen or what we see in movies? It has to be different. It has to be a way that is, I think, more beautiful in the sense of loving each other through it. And there's different ways to build that intimacy in our communication, how we talk, how we build our friendship, how we engage as a husband and wife in loving each other through service, through spiritual intimacy, through mental, emotional. There's different kinds of intimacy. And so it's just one part of the picture if we're just thinking sex. And then it's only a small part of the picture if we think that sex is just intercourse, because it's not. It's so much more than just intercourse. That's just one small part of it.
Hey, I'm just popping in here mid-episode to say I hope you're loving this content. And if you want more, make sure you hit that subscribe button and leave a comment with something that stood out to you from this episode. Now let's get back to it. I like that you brought that up. I had somebody in their 40s recently ask me, like, what is sex?
Mm.
I was like, oh, I've never been asked that before. Like, what is sex? And I had to think about that. Like, how do you define that? Because it used to, in my mind, just be intercourse, but it's not.
Yeah.
It's such a more full picture. I like how you say it. It's serving the other. It's serving your spouse.
Yeah.
That's cool. I do need to say I've never been aroused through a pin drop. That's that's never happened. I don't know about others, but yeah, I just got to throw that out there. But that whole picture is actually, to me, very profound, because if I think about sex and the picture of it pointing to the Lord, I mean, God, He wants intimacy with us all the time. Like He's always ready to go, not sexual, but like He's always pursuing us, right?
Yeah.
But for us, sometimes we got a headache. Sometimes we're tired.
Yeah.
Sometimes we're not feeling it. So we don't pursue that intimacy.
Yeah.
I'm like, wow, what a picture that sex gives, actually. That like, no matter what, the Lord's like, He wants it. He's always ready for closeness with us.
Mm-hmm.
But even when we're not reciprocating that, He pursues us. He gently initiates in the way that He knows that we would feel loved, and He's after our hearts. And I'm like, wow, there's so much Christ in the picture of sex.
Yes.
It is so profound.
It
So
is.
go,
Yeah.
go ahead. Go ahead. Go ahead.
Well, I was just going to say it's the way that God is with us. I mean, the imagery that we see throughout Scripture of Jesus being the bridegroom and us being the bride as the church. The way that our relationship with Him is. I mean, there's a not only is He our Lord and Savior, but there's the term described as He's our friend, He's our counselor. He's a provider. All these beautiful imagery, and they're all true of how God interacts with us. Why wouldn't that be at the heart of what sex is? Because it is a deep knowing. When we know our spouse on that level, it's more than just I know what color they like. It's more than just I know what their favorite meal is. It's a knowing that only can be experienced as husband and wife. That there's a mystery to it. I don't think we fully understand or could put language to it. But I think that's so beautiful, the way that God interacts with us. And I think sex with our spouse points towards God in such a deep, profound way that sometimes we just miss out on that. And that's such a different thing. If we have that view, it can transform the way that our sex lives are, because so many challenges arise in the sense of, I am not getting my needs met. I am not feeling content in this. You are not doing what you're supposed to be doing. Like it's really, we sprinkle a little of that pride and selfishness into this, and it twists and distorts something that's supposed to be so beautiful. And I understand we all go through it as individuals. We all are learning how to become like Christ, what that does in our relationship, in our marriage. I didn't know a lot of what I know now back in day one when I got married. I had a very selfish view of sex. And unfortunately for my wife and I, there was challenges. There's so many challenges when it comes to sex. There's still things we're learning. And, but the beautiful thing is God gives us grace. And then when we learn to do that for each other in this relationship, as we talk and as we grow, we feel safe. We feel heard. We feel like we matter to the other. And I think that it just gives you such a confidence in your marriage in a way that I think that God designed, to know that this one person knows you, knows all of you, all the warts, all the challenges, all the past, and still loves you, accepts you. And I think that's the beautiful picture of how God obviously views us. And we're not going to be perfect at that, but as we become more like Christ, we become we were more able to do that for each other, and not only do that for each other but receive that from God and from each other as well too.
That's amazing. That was really well put. That's very profound. Talk about there's a couple books titled Sex Expectations. So you talked about sexual
Yeah.
sexual expectations. One's by Mike Novotny. I just saw another one when we were in Atlanta
Hmm.
last month called Sex Expectations. I forget who it was from, but or who it was written by. But anyways, oftentimes we come into marriage with different expectations, but you were saying before we recorded that we have the same desire. So like a spouse, both spouses will have the same desire
Hmm.
for a healthy sex life, but there's different expectations about what that will look like, how to go about that. Can you speak to that?
Yeah. So I think if you were to pull most couples when they're starting out, even through the life of their marriage, they would all say they both desire a quality, loving, safe, vibrant sex life. Most people would say that. But our expectations, understanding what that means, lived out in our marriage can be very different. And this is where so many challenges arise for couples. And a lot of it can stem from libido differences for sure. Typically men will have a higher libido than women. Not always. That's a generalization, but it
Yeah.
generally tends to be true.
Yeah.
And I think that one of the challenges in this too is, I don't want, just a little bit of an aside, is learning how to steward that in a way that's God honoring, but honoring of our spouse too. But just putting a pin in that, because these expectations often are unspoken and unsaid. I mean, I guess that's the same thing. Unspoken, unsaid. Assumption gets made. And this is where friction arises, because we just assume that the other knows what we're thinking. And why don't they do what I want them to do? Or why aren't they living up to what I think this should be? And then you just get really disillusioned. For instance, one person might think we're going to have sex, 6 times a week and 3 times on Sunday. And the other one thinks, no, I'm more on a one a week basis. That's more comfortable for me. So they both have a desire for a great sex life, but how they get to that are very different. And then that's what occurs, is where the person with the higher libido feels like they're just chasing after the low libido person all the time, and the low libido person feels harassed. And then so sex all of a sudden becomes this negative thing. And really what's happening here is both people want the same thing, but because they haven't talked about their expectations and what that's going to look like to meet those expectations in a way that gets them on the same page, they start to view the other person as the source of the problem. And then sex, I'm going to tell you, right, when someone's angry, they're not very sexy. When someone's frustrated, that's not very sexy. So then sex all of a sudden has this pressure baked in. It has this negativity baked into it. And then it becomes something that's pulling a couple apart versus bringing them together. And so communicating about what our expectations are is such an important and vital part of sex. And I understand that that can be really awkward because we haven't been taught how to do this. Like, Matt, we've talked about this lots, right? Like growing up, the conversations from our parents around this regard. Like, we love our parents, love my parents, they're great, but there wasn't a lot of voice given to this, at least on my sense. So what that did for me is it created more shame, more confusion, even more curiosity that led me to obviously some bad things later down the road. But I didn't know how to talk about sex. It was awkward. And I brought that into our marriage with my wife. And she had a similar kind of wiring, talk about sex growing up. Didn't know how to talk about that. So you come into marriage and you both bring that awkwardness. And then because you don't want to rock the boat, you don't want to share something that maybe would hurt the other. You don't want to talk about maybe some deeper inner things. You just put it on the shelf and you just expect sex to go great. And when it doesn't, you just feel really disappointed. And usually the reason why is because we're just not talking. We're not expressing to each other what our expectations regarding sex are. And sometimes I get this. Anybody listening out there, sometimes talking about sex can be even have other layers of difficulty because some of us have gone through trauma. Some of us have abuse as part of our story. And talking about sex brings up this whole host of emotion and memory. And it's really difficult to talk about sex, let alone our expectations. And if that's you, I just want to say right now, I'm so sorry that those things occurred in your past. But I will say this is I'm praying for the courage for you to get help because trauma and abuse, these aren't things that just can get swept under the rug and they get better. We actually have to face them. We have to get the help that we need to deal with that. And sometimes that means a third party professional help, but we need community ultimately to be able to deal with those things. And so that we can have a great sex life. And we know this. I know this being in marriage ministry is we have seen couples that have had abuse part of their past or trauma of some kind. They get the help that they need, they get the healing, and they have great sex lives now. But they had to do the work. And I'm so sorry, I know, because you're like, for some of you, that wasn't a choice you made. Something was done to you and it wasn't fair. I get that. And you're like, why do I have to do the work now for someone else's choice? And I know it is not fair. It's not. But the incredible thing is God's so good to us. And when we do make that decision to expose what happened in a way that brings healing and where we can connect to Jesus in this and get others help. The freedom that we can walk in and experience as God brings healing to us is so powerful and profound. And you might have thought, well, this is just my lot in life, the struggle I'm going to have because of what happened to me when I was younger. It doesn't have to be. You can have freedom in such a profound way and have a great sex life in your marriage. And so my encouragement to you is to well, I'm praying for you to have that courage to step out and do that, to disclose to somebody what happened and get the help you need.
Yeah, that's really well put. I just heard of a survivor. She's really famous. A lot of people have heard of her, but she was abducted and then raped and tortured for I think it was 18 years and got pregnant by her abuser. And anyways, then she escaped and she got free. And now she's married. And she was asked that question, like, how do you have sex in your marriage? And she was like, it's not even close to the same. Like
Mhm.
when you're being abused, it's not the same as when you're making love and you're with someone who cares about you. But I thought, wow, what a healed and mature perspective that is, because not a lot of people get there.
Yep,
A lot do. I shouldn't say a lot don't, but some people don't get there where there's been abuse in the past,
yep.
but then they can see that the present reality is beautiful. But it might not always be abuse, it might just be bad messaging. It
Oh,
might
yeah.
be like right? Like, it could be somebody's a virgin, but they've just seen pornography, and then they're turned off by what they see in porn,
Yep.
and they think it's dirty, or they've heard that their friend did something dirty, and they just think that that's disgusting, and I at a workshop I was doing a few months ago, this lady called out, and she's like, "I just always believed men were dirty, like, all men were dirty."
Right. Yeah.
And it's like, that's a very common one,
Yeah.
but if you think about it, like, men have this is I've never said this, I don't think, but I really think men have a high sex drive typically, not always, but typically, because of this correlation that we're called to lead and God lead and we're called to lead like God does,
Mhm.
and he pursues intimacy, and if sexuality, like, is a catalyst for greater intimacy in a relationship, no wonder he gave a man who he's called to lead a high sex drive, because he's
Yep.
then the men leads towards intimacy. And so
Yep.
the fact that men want or men typically, like, have a high drive, that's not a dirty thing or a perverted thing. It's been perverted.
Yep.
But naturally speaking, it's like that's a very beautiful thing that God has done to create
Yep.
more intimacy. And
Yes.
so anyways, just to get all of these messages to the light is really important, even if there's never been abuse. But if it's just like wrong messaging,
Yep.
that we have a thought about sex that isn't in line with God's word, it's really important to communicate about that. Hey, isn't it
And
awkward though? Like with the couples that you work with, is there an awkwardness that you find, or like what's the hesitation? What gets in the way of couples having these conversations?
well, I definitely think that even what you're talking about sometimes is just the messages that we have believed about the opposite sex sometimes. A big one is, and this can come from religious circles, is it's the man's need and the wife's duty.
Yeah,
And so duty sex message has been so harmful in the church. And what that teaches is that men are just animals of base desire and they're just pawing at their wives all the time. And their wives have sex simply to please their husband. Whereas God designed sex, the true messaging is for mutual gratification. It is something that's mutual, where we both get pleasure. We both feel connected. We both feel amazing as a result of that love and that intimacy. And that message is so often lost. And this is typically for women who have been raised in a culture like that, that really it's not for them. And then so what does a woman do with that in marriage? Now sex becomes this thing that's just for her husband, and she never receives anything back from it. So then what occurs is it's just a very selfish sex that starts to take place in that marriage. And the husband maybe doesn't know this. Like he might be a great guy. He has no clue that his wife has that messaging. And he doesn't know how to talk about sex either, because he might have the understanding too that, well, I have just all these urges that I just have to get out and deal with. And my wife's the recipient of all that. I don't really know how to please her, and maybe I don't know what to do here, and so I don't really talk about it, and she doesn't talk about it. So well, let's just suffer together in our marriage and not talking about it. So that messaging can be very harmful, and for both. The messaging for us as guys that often what came from the purity culture is that again, we've talked about this. How frustrated we get with this is that we're just animalistic, and we have all these needs and desires we have no control over, so we have to run away from any temptation in a way that is just harmful. Or not only that, we start to blame and become a victim to our circumstance or the people around us. You know, if we're at a restaurant and there's a woman dressed provocatively as our waitress, all of a sudden she's at fault. You know, we have no control. And what that does for men too is a damaging messaging that we can't steward this. This is out of control urges. And so it's up to our wife to meet those urges. Otherwise, we're in trouble. Like one of the most challenging ones that I've heard messaging that's so damaging is for a wife, or even it could be a husband too, but typically it's the wife, is that you have to have sex with your husband so he doesn't look at porn.
yeah,
Like, how damaging is that? Now, all of a sudden, she's responsible for his choices. And what does that teach about her husband? That, again, there's not a lot of respect there that I think that a woman would have for her husband in that sense, because, well, you have no choice in this. You're just completely a slave to your base urges. And I'm the one that has to take care of that for you. So then what that does for sex, again, is it becomes duty and also fearful. It's like if I don't make love to my husband, now all of a sudden he's going to go cheat on me, or he's going to look at women lustfully. So I have to take care of that problem for him. And then men will demand it too because they've been taught that message. Well, I have to bring this question to my wife, otherwise I'm going to stumble. And so I've heard this. It's so sad that it occurs, but a husband might say something like, "If you don't do this for me, I'm going to go look at porn, or I'm going to look at that woman, or I'm more at risk of cheating." And so that just creates a fear-based dynamic in a relationship around sex. And I don't think sex is designed by God, and I know it isn't, to have fear as a central emotion. It really isn't. Fear is not safe. Fear is one of those things that cripples us, and we can't be free to enjoy. We can't be free to serve in that regard because it's something that just shackles us. I mean, fear is not a good thing.
mm,
So there's some messaging there that I've seen. I know that was a little long-winded, but there's other messaging that can occur too, even from our family and upbringing of origin, where it might be a cultural thing too, because in some cultures you don't talk about sex. It's just not something that's ever been modeled, and so sex for if you've been raised in that environment, is viewed with a little bit of confusion. Sometimes there's like I said, a lot of awkwardness. Sometimes it's just icky. It's viewed as icky. And or sometimes even to the far extreme, it becomes just for procreation. Like it's dirty to think of sex as being pleasurable. And we've seen people that have taken a hatchet to the Bible and try to retwist and twist what God's actually said in some verses to make it sound like it's just an allegory, or it doesn't really have any
Yeah.
meaning physically for us, and that's so damaging. That's a damaging message. So there's a lot of things that we have to come to terms with as a couple, and I know this is challenging because we're just not taught how to do this. It's like, especially within the church, sometimes it can be, don't think about sex. Don't think about sex. Be pure. And then when you get married, have amazing sex. And I'm not saying that the response to that needs to be that we, in our formative years, that we have all these inappropriate conversations. No, it's appropriate conversations of understanding. Matt, you teach so wonderful on this of Jesus centered sexuality, of understanding what this means for us and understanding how God fits into this and being open to have these discussions, open about what's going on for us and to talk about these desires, to talk about our sexuality, to understand how this plays out in the covenant that we have with God and what that means for marriage. So I don't think we need less communication around sex. If anything, we need more, but done in an appropriate way. And I think that's a key distinction because the other way, the other extreme is when someone is taught that message of don't think about it, they get really curious and then they can go the other end and they just really explore sexuality and explore the way the world talks about sex. And that's damaging too. So it's one of those things that you can go that way as well, and then what that does in your marriage too is that you bring in that selfish view of sex because that's what the world's preaching.
I think a lot of us can relate to a lot of that. Some people say sex is dirty, sex is dirty, don't do it, save it for the one you love, right?
Hmm.
It's like, oh man, why am I saving this for the one that I love if it's so dirty? And then people start having sex and they feel dirty right away. And man, there's so much complication. So if somebody or if a couple feels awkward and there's been a lot of silence or there's been a lot of mismatched expectations, experiences, a lot of disappointment. How does a couple then have these conversations? How do they go about it? What does a husband do? What does a wife do if they're like, okay, I think that we need to do this? Where do they start?
That's a really good question. Sometimes when it comes to areas of sex, it's great to have a third party present to be able to talk about these things because the way that we talk about it can be accusatory. There can be a lot of hurt and pain that comes through, and that's all that we're communicating. So it can be hard to have a really good conversation if we've never done it before. So bringing in a third party to help with that might be beneficial. You may not need that too. It might just be starting and setting some ground rules around how you talk about it. And so what was some examples of that could be is, one of you is going to share and the other just listens. And when you listen, you're not rationalizing, you're not denying anything, you're not blaming. You just listen and then you validate everything that's been shared. And you do that for each other. Because I think the key thing is sometimes if you just don't feel heard, if you feel like all that you've been met with is defensiveness, accusation, you just stop sharing. You don't want to talk anymore. So creating some guardrails, some guidelines around how you talk about sex is maybe a way to go. Because it's not so much just sharing the nitty gritty; it's really how you talk to one another. What's the tone? Is there any contempt or criticism occurring? Are you bringing up other things that have nothing to do with the issue at hand? Are you gaslighting each other? Like there's different things that can really cause damage to a communication session or time with each other around sex. So set some guardrails. If you don't know how to do that, get some help around that regard as well too. There's a lot of great resources on how to communicate better with each other. Come to a weekend getaway
Yeah.
and learn how to talk to each other and how to just listen. And I think the key thing is I always tell myself this is when Kristen's sharing something, that's my wife, I need to listen to understand because listening sometimes is I'm just thinking about what I'm going to share. I'm not even really listening to what she's talking about. And usually that it just takes a few seconds, right? And we're jumping in right away to the answer that I'm going to give to, give my argument and make my case. And then you're not listening to understand when you're doing that. You're listening to just basically override and to argue and to win your point. So I think it's important just to be quiet and then reflect back what the other person is sharing. So if you can at least do that, you're going to start moving in safety because so many couples don't talk about sex because they don't feel safe or they don't feel heard. So they just stop. So if you can create a place where you feel safe and you feel heard, then the conversation can start to unfold and flourish and begin to flourish. And I think that's just some key things. So I know every couple out there listening, you're unique. You've gone through a lot of different things. I'm not going to be able to speak to all the nuance of your relationship. However, if you can begin on those levels, first, maybe you need to get some third party help and then also set some guidelines around how you're going to talk about sex with each other and be in agreement about it, you have a much better shot at growing in this intimacy, an important piece of your relationship.
That's awesome. That's awesome. And validating what the other person heard could simply be like repeating back what you
That's
are
right.
hearing them say.
That's
And
right.
some people say like repeat back their last sentence or their last 3 words, or just, hey, I think what you're saying is this, and repeat that back and get clarification. Because so often there's like we don't hear what they're saying. We hear what we think they're trying to intend to say,
Uh-huh.
but
Yep.
not what they're actually saying. So that's really important. And to talk about things like detailed things, like talk about intercourse, talk about oral sex, talk about fondling, talk about time of
Uh-huh.
day, talk about um, um, how to initiate or toys or like whatever you want to talk about. Like it's good to get biblical understanding on things and do some research on that, but then talk about that in a detailed sense. And if you have bitterness and emotions around all this stuff, I think it's important for us to take that to God. Somebody said to me recently, take your hurting heart to God, take your whole heart to your spouse. And it's
Mm,
like you could take your hurting heart, like your hurts to the Lord, process that, maybe even get some counsel on it so that it doesn't show up in that conversation with defensiveness and blaming and accusations, and come at it with the real servant's heart that you want to steward this thing together, steward sexuality together in your marriage for God's glory. And that's different than coming at it with all the negative emotions that often we carry.
that's right. Oh, that's really well said. And I just want to say that there's hope. There's always hope for whatever you're going through. If you've been through a real rough season in this regard, sometimes you can feel like there's not a tomorrow for you. And that's not true. I mean, when God's in this, in the midst of our marriage, He transforms, He does miracles, He makes everything better for us. But I understand in this regard, it can take time. It can take a journey together of consistently communicating, getting the help that we need, and creating a place and space for us to feel safe and to endeavor as husband and wife to serve each other. So I understand again that there can be challenge to this, but there is hope. And I hope that just resonates with you right now. If you're feeling a little hopeless, we just know this that you know what happened yesterday doesn't have to be our tomorrow, and what our current present reality is doesn't have to be what tomorrow looks like either. It's one of those things that no matter what stage in life of marriage, we can have the best years of our lives together ahead. And it's just something that sometimes we need to hear that message and know there is a vision for our marriage and God's in the midst of it. And so I pray that for you, everybody listening. Even if you're single, I pray that for you too. And if you get married, I pray that for you as well. And if you're single and remain single, God has an incredible plan and purpose for you as well too.
Thank you, bro. Such gold came out of your mouth in this episode, and yeah, I learned a lot from you even today, but over the years, and this is so good. So, if you're
Oh, it's
listening, guys,
awesome.
get involved with Family Life, familylifecanada.com, and also go to a weekend getaway in Canada. It is worth the weekend. So, Braden,
Mhm.
thanks, bro.
No problem, buddy. Glad to do it.
To keep learning about how Jesus centered sexuality was designed by God to transform your life like it has for me and so many other people, make sure you subscribe for more content. And if you have any form of sexual bondage in your life, whether it's pornography or sexual abuse or sexual betrayal that you've suffered, make sure you check the description for options for your support.